The last 2 weeks and this one have all been about Spinoza, and you may be wondering why. So, a reminder, Antonio Damasio thinks Spinoza is important because he dealt with the subjects that preoccupied me, Antonio Damasio, most as a scientist: the nature of emotions and feelings and the relation of mind to body. To my eyes, Damasio says, he seemed to have prefigured solutions that researchers are now offering on a number of these issues. So we'll delve deeper into Damasio, but even more so, Deleuze, who thinks that what Spinoza goes on to say about why we should carry on using the words good and bad is really important. There is no good and evil, but there is good and bad. And this quotation, though, is not from Spinoza, it's from Nietzsche on the genealogy of morals. On that note, tomorrow we'll return to this, which is my recreation of a postcard that Nietzsche wrote about Spinoza. Good morning. Today we're returning to this, which is my recreation of a postcard that Spinoza wrote to his friend Overbeck regarding his great precursor, Spinoza.
I hardly knew Spinoza. That I should have turned to him just now was inspired by instinct. Not only is his over-tendency like mine, namely to make all knowledge the most powerful affect, but in 5 main points of his doctrine I recognize myself.
Spinoza and Nietzsche are both challenging a stark distinction between knowledge and emotion. Spinoza also denies, according to Nietzsche's list just here, the freedom of the will, teleology, the moral world order, the unegoistic and evil. And we've been beginning to recognize this is true of Spinoza. For my original reading of this postcard, you can see Let It Hatch 8, which is my favourite part of Into the Field so far. Tomorrow, we'll consider what Nietzsche has to say about Spinoza in his published writings, which is not very complimentary. Good morning. Given that Spinoza is Nietzsche's great precursor, according to this postcard, it'll be interesting to see what Nietzsche has to say about Spinoza in Beyond Good and Evil, which is this. Here's Nietzsche talking about the subtle tricks of old moralists and moral preachers, not to speak of that hocus pocus of mathematical form in which, as if in iron, Spinoza encased and masked his philosophy. How much personal timidity and vulnerability this masquerade of a sick recluse betrays. Here, Nietzsche is denying that the drive to self-preservation is our cardinal drive, and saying that we owe it to Spinoza's inconsistency that we think that it is. Here Nietzsche lays into the no more laughing and no more weeping of Spinoza, that destruction of the emotions through analysis and vivisection, which he advocated so naively. Today we're taking 1 minute to try and make sense of these 5 things, beginning with yesterday's 3 criticisms of Spinoza from Nietzsche, which starkly contrast with these 5 specifics that Nietzsche claimed he and Spinoza had in common, this again in a postcard that he wrote to Overbeck in 1881. Here, from 3 weeks ago, we have our analysis of the affects from Spinoza, which is a very large part of, here, Spinoza's ethics, and something that Nietzsche comes to dislike. And finally, just here, we have Spinoza Practical Philosophy by Deleuze, a book on Spinoza that starts with the name Nietzsche. So it's going to be fruitful for the rest of this week to make sense of how these points of comparison are compatible with these forceful critiques. We will turn to Spinoza's ethics to figure out what he has to contribute about going beyond good and evil. So Nietzsche is famously critical of Christians, right? And the reason is this: because their use of the word good is the reverse of that of the aristocratic man. So Nietzsche is inviting us to imagine this aristocratic man becoming conscious of this transition to a state of feeling healthy. Now that the aristocratic man is consciously enjoying himself over here, those who are not enjoying themselves observe him in a distorted way through the venomous eye of resentment. So in summary, whereas this aristocratic man conceives the basic concept good first, spontaneously, then creates a concept bad, the resentful man conceives the concept evil first, and then conceives himself as good by contrast. Nietzsche, of course, does not like this. What do you think about his ideas about the formation of our ideas about right doing and wrong doing. Let's attempt a Nietzschean interpretation of what's going on with this postcard and Beyond Good and Evil regarding Spinoza. When Nietzsche's feeling good, he's stepping into his power good. And he notices in this field here, another healthy man. My dearest Overbeck, he writes, I am utterly amazed. I hardly knew Spinoza. That I should have turned to him just now was inspired by instinct. You have Nietzsche feeling good, feeling instinctual, observing another healthy man. I can't believe it. I'm utterly amazed. There's another me. But the more he studies Spinoza, the less happy he is with him. It's as if Nietzsche is now standing alone here in this field of healthy beings, and he's looking down at the unhealthy, timid, vulnerable, reclusive Spinoza and deeming him to be bad. So that's the Nietzschean interpretation. Today we're going to consider a Spinozan interpretation of that same encounter we've considered for the last couple of days. So here, our first character, our first elated individual, feels good, he's optimally functioning, and having that sensation and awareness of it, he has knowledge of good. Because knowledge of good is nothing but an affect of joy insofar as we are conscious of it. By now, we have two elated individuals in that field just there. The second one is Nietzsche. He's observing Spinoza and experiencing love, which is joy, plus the idea of an external cause. The idea that he's discovered a precursor, considered as the cause of his sense of elation. But what's going on here? Our first elated individual seems to be joyfully forging a pretty idiosyncratic way of his own. A way that is quite different from Nietzsche's and unattractive to him. This makes Nietzsche feel sorrow and a bunch of these emotions. Hate, which is nothing but consciousness of this sorrow, plus the idea here of Spinoza as an external cause. Maybe even remorse, as he recalls having written this love postcard. What would Spinoza make of this? Well, on the simplest level, he would remind us, Proposition 41 of Part 4 of the Ethics, that all other things being equal, joy or elation is good, and sadness is bad or evil. And Nietzsche is vehemently passionate about his disdain for Spinoza. Part of what annoys Nietzsche so much about Spinoza is his consciousness that Spinoza would recommend joyful contemplation of the necessity of these matters as a means of liberating him from bondage to his passions, therein cultivating true, sustainable love of God, aka nature, and all modes of substance, including, especially, himself. When it comes to this business of saving ourselves from ourselves by understanding more about our brains and our bodies, world-renowned scientist Antonio Damasio thinks that Spinoza is right on the money.